So basically what we're saying is this is a partner dance.
Yeah. Hello and welcome to another zany episode of Nerdy West Coast Swing, the podcast with pixels where the anchors are out of this world and the points don't matter. We are here to help train your eyes so you can learn faster and dance better. I'm Cassie Winter.
I'm Alicia Marshall. If you're wondering who are we to be analyzing these pros, Cassie and I both have extensive training and experience in both partnered and solo dancing. She has about 22 years and I have about 24. So tonight we are taking a look at an all-star champ, Jack and Jill first place. We're looking at Austin Coyce and Chelsea Palmer. I assume Cassie will put that in the chat.
Link is in the chat. Go ahead and give it a watch. When you're done, we'll get to analyze it. Is there anything you want to say in particular before we head over to the screen share?
I don't think so.
Yeah, because we're just framing through the whole shebang tonight.
Yeah.
All right, to the screen share.
We have a really nice start to this dance. We're starting in a kind of a closed position, but it's kind of more than closed position. It's like a kind of chest to chest closed position of sorts, which is good for kind of how they start. So Chelsea really allows the movement to kind of flow through. It kind of starts with Austin kind of grabbing the arms, and she kind of lets that settle. And then he moves again, and she lets that settle slowly.
Yeah, it's really appropriate for the chill nature of the song.
Yeah. So this is a great example of not committing all at once. And I know that, I don't know that we've talked super in detail about that before, but it's really good for follows, especially to not commit to a movement all at once. Otherwise, if it is a movement that's held out longer, drawn out more, it's going to stop and then nothing else is going to happen. And ideally, you want it to kind of flow through into the next movement. So the way that you do that, and you can see, can you go back to like right when he initiates that like dip thing?
Yeah.
So you can see here, she allows the upper body and the arm to go first, and then she lets the hips settle back afterwards. It's kind of like a ripple effect, right? So we start with the shoulder, and then she leaves all the rest of her body forward initially, and then she lets it relax and drop. So like the best way to go about not fully committing all at once is to make sure that you have your body a little bit forward or like really placed in the initial position and then relaxing out of it.
I love how at the very end here, she really finishes the movement with finishing the tilt of her pelvis and straightening her right leg.
Yeah.
Before rolling back in the other direction.
Yeah. Really nice.
And I love how Austin takes this moment here to go into a really nice line and lunge himself. Like this is a fantastic moment right here. Yeah. And it's only the beginning of the dance and they haven't done a single pattern.
Right.
For swing content.
Yeah, it's nice. And I also want to point out that when Austin goes into that lunge, he is using that hand on her thigh to signal to her that he wants her to come back up, because we've talked about this equal and opposite balance thing quite frequently. So when Chelsea goes back into that kind of dip as Austin is going into this lunge, you can see she has her standing leg, and then she has that right leg, and then she's arcing. So she has the standing leg is kind of the center of everything, and then she has the one leg out in front of her, and she's arcing back behind her. So Austin wants to signal her to come all the way up. So he initiates it by kind of lightly pushing on her thigh, and that kind of brings her back up because she's really equal and balanced on both sides. So when he starts straightening the leg, she knows, okay, this isn't going to be balanced anymore, so I need to come up. And I love that she finishes after she comes up out of it. So she comes up with the head and then she like continues to settle in the hips. So because she doesn't set back initially, it allows her to be able to shift forward a little bit more and then really anchor and sit into that position before he leads her anywhere.
Yep. And as she's settling back into his hand on her back, he also is settling away from her, prepping to lead the first count. So he is leading the thing he wants to happen before it needs to happen.
Yep.
Chain, order of operations.
One thing that I want to point out about Chelsea specifically, she has a very unique look to her movement. It almost looks a little prancy, not necessarily in a bad way, but she looks really kind of light in her movement or flighty. I don't know.
It's like really almost ladylike.
Yeah.
Because like prancy or flighty could have like negative connotations, but like I love her movement so much.
Yeah. So yeah, she has a very unique movement and she accomplishes it by a few things. One of the main things is that she very rarely ends up with her heels actually on the floor. She tends to dance with her heels off the floor like 95% of the time. When she really needs to anchor or settle, she will occasionally put the heel down. She actually doesn't always do that. Right here. Yeah, right. And she uses it really well when she does put the heel down, but it is something that she doesn't do particularly frequently. So that's like what I would say is probably the main aspect of it. But the other two things is that she really keeps her feet close under her. She does not take large steps, right? She kind of has a really small base that she works with. And you can even tell when she is being like moved forward quite a ways, like she's still not taking massive steps. It still looks rather small. In terms of like comparisons to maybe like Cameo. Cameo tends to take really larger steps. But yeah, Chelsea has a really small base generally that she works with. And it really, that in combination with her not putting her heels down very frequently gives her that unique look. The last thing I would say is she tends to get into kind of over rotated positions quite frequently. Like here. This is a little bit more led by Austin, but she is not against like letting herself fall into an over rotated position.
Yeah, she very much doesn't fight what's happening, just something I really appreciate about her. And then the small sizes of her steps allows her to have more control in situations. When something goes to like slightly awry, she's able to handle it really beautifully. So I want to look at this ride that Austin's leading. He is excellent at these particular kinds of patterns. And the flourish that he does of kicking back his right leg before settling into this ride is not only great to look at, it's a great styling, but it's functional as well, because he's really using his right leg and hip weight to help counterbalance the movement and also to initiate Chelsea's forward walking around him.
So you can see right here when she really lets those hips swing forward and like the left hip is almost like farther forward than you might think it would be to be like even with her body. So that's kind of where she allows that over rotation is within the hips and the lower body. Because Austin is kind of pressing her open, but not quite to that extent.
Yeah, she's adding that in.
I really like the styling that Austin does out of that.
Same.
It's a really nice ronde. Very simple.
Really clean. Like he has such lovely lines as a leader.
He does. And this hook behind is something that's, in my opinion, fairly important to learn for various reasons. As a styling piece, I think it's important, but also being able to learn this hook behind can help you when you get into kind of odd positions that you might not expect to be in. Being able to hook behind and release that standing leg.
Yep.
Yeah, so if you watch, he has that right leg. It comes around. It's really nicely pointed and straight. And he allows it to come all the way around behind him. And as he transfers his weight onto that right foot, he lets the left leg that he had his weight on bend forward and release. And he even uses that right knee to kick out that front leg.
So one thing besides being a styling that this does is it's a really interesting way to brace against the tension in the connection. Because as he's doing this ronde, because of the bend in his legs, he's overall much more forward, right? But when he brings this leg and hooks behind and kicks it out, he now is pitched more away, like his hips are really sending away down the slot. Whereas his upper body was coming towards her before. So not only did it look amazing, but it was functional as well.
I want to point out how Chelsea really settles into that before this 1 foot. So Chelsea comes into this really nice line with her left leg, and she is actually weighted fully on that right leg. She has the heel all the way down, and she kind of allows that to swing back forward with that left foot. And you can see, so she places the left foot, and then she makes sure that where she is moving, she moves on top of it with her hips, right? So because her foot is out in front of her, she needs to continue moving and move the hips on top of the foot in order to really get a connection to her hip for Austin. And because she bends the knees as she's doing that, that's adding some extra grounding momentum, right? Because you can see she's kind of dropping. So that mixed with her kind of rounding around the side, coming around the side, it really creates kind of like a grinding type feeling, but like in a positive way. This is a really lovely 1 foot from both perspectives. Austin does a really good job of leading and giving her the space she needs.
Yeah, and the shaping that Chelsea does is absolutely lovely. But we've done an entire episode on 1 foot turns, so we shall not spend an hour here.
It's our most popular episode. I appreciate that Chelsea finishes it out with some hairography.
Yes.
She makes sure to not let, because she has the head tipped to the side, when she comes up out of it, she's not like flipping her hair or anything. So it would just kind of fall in her face as she comes up. So she chooses to do like a really nice arm styling up and above the head in order to pull the hair back and put it in place.
It's really simple. She's just following through in the same rotational direction as her turn for that arm styling. So it looks really organic.
Yeah.
And she doesn't have to think too hard to do it.
I think one of the most distracting things to watch for follows with long hair is when it kind of falls in their face and they either like do something that's not within what they're already doing to move it out of the way, or they leave it there. Both, I feel personally, are distracting.
Yes. And then there are the times when the leaders won't let them have at least one hand to fix it.
Yeah.
I hate that.
That's great.
Please consider your follow's ability to see. Thanks.
I have that moment on video for me personally. It's great. All my hair is forward.
Yeah. I'm kind of happy that we do the masking thing for the most part now, because then I don't have to worry about hair sticking to my lip gloss.
Sure.
Anyways, things to be grateful for, right?
Here we have Chelsea doing a little more over rotation again with that hip. It's the same exact shape as before.
On another follow, I might not like that shape, but on her, like I love the way it looks.
Yeah.
And then I want to highlight how much tension is inside this prep right here. So notice how Austin isn't necessarily rotating his upper body or shifting which rail the handhold is over as he's going into this prep for her. He's focusing mainly on continuing to travel while allowing just a little bit of rotation. So there's some rotation in the wrist happening, but he's not necessarily moving the handhold from rail to rail, which is really common to see. And it feels so much better as a follow to get attention prep in these kinds of turns than kind of like a, here, go over to this rail, here, go over to that rail. It's like single tracking, I think, is a term that's good to use a lot.
Yeah.
But often it gets led in a double tracking, kind of like you feel like fishtails or whatever. You know what I'm trying to describe.
Yeah.
It's not fun.
Chelsea also tends to be kind of selective in when she connects to her arm. So you can see kind of when they come through that. Can you go back just a little bit? So when she unwinds from this wrap right here, and then this arm is wrapping across the front of her body, she's still kind of has the upper body going and her hips are kind of in the same position, right? So her upper body is moving separately from the hips and lower body. And generally, if you were to really settle into this particular position, you would want the hips to be the ones continuing to move and the upper body just kind of goes with it. A lot of the reasons that Chelsea kind of does more selective connection with the hip and the arm is because she does like styling things in very particular ways. So that kind of gives her the freedom to choose when to connect and follow and choose when she wants to put her own flair on something.
Austin's doing a wonderful job of having leg lines through these kind of like bell kicks as he's traveling backwards, and also through this lunge. And the slight bevel in his ankle is also absolutely lovely.
Yeah, Austin is really good at creating nice lines, but also using them. They're, you know, they're for some type of reason. It's not just for the effect of the line of the leg.
Yeah, it's a very masculine use of lines. Oh, is this? Oh, yes. I've always wanted to slow-mo through this moment because it's so delicious.
It's such a cool, but also really pretty moment in the way that they move through it.
Because it's so clearly connected. Like she's doing this because Austin is counterbalancing. And you can tell like he's doing a leg line while he's doing it. But having this foot way out here and having his hips rotated this way while letting his shoulders rotate this way so he can actually reach over her head allows him to offer a lot of strength and counterbalance to this handhold. So she has something to lean against. So while it's not a fully weight supported move, it's weight assisted. There is enough counterbalance and connection there that she's like, ooh, can I go further? Ooh, can I go further? Ooh, can I go further?
Yeah.
And then when she can no longer, like, it musically becomes no longer appropriate to keep holding there, they naturally just fall into the end of an underarm turn. It's lovely.
Yeah. Can you go back to right when she goes into the start of that?
Yeah.
So I just want to point out here, Chelsea's hand is facing in front of her, right? So she is pressing forward into this connection, and that is keeping her shoulder in a really nice neutral position. And so she has full control over what she wants to do with it, which is why she can rotate like the way that she does and still have that solid connection, is because she starts out with the arm in front of her and she's pushing forward. And it's a very gradual, the way I like to kind of describe this is it kind of starts at the top and then moves down in terms of how much weight you're giving, right? So you're initially giving kind of the upper body and the arm and maybe a little bit of the chest. And then as you feel that resistance, she's then kind of committing the hips into it. And then she's letting the hips kind of sink forward. And that's what's really giving that away movement. And she releases that right side of her body in order to rotate around, right? So she's releasing the right side of her body, even though she's coming across the front with that left foot.
And I just want to highlight how intimately tethered this connection is, because you can see how it's affecting how Austin's hip is closing to her at the end. Like his hips are rotating to his right, but that is because of the connection. So good.
And they both land out of this really smoothly. I like that they both go into a nice lunged kind of bent knee position. They kind of sink down into it. They don't just come around and stop.
Yeah. And they're not rushing out of, they just did either.
So I really like this send out. It's a really different angle because of the compression that Chelsea has into her left arm. Austin's able to take that and rotate it and then send her towards the audience.
Yeah. And it does a bit from a bird's eye view, kind of like an arc. So if we were looking bird's eye view of the slot, Austin's arm comes in and it does one of those ending up that way. This arc part is really important because that allows the change in angle to feel organic and for it to flow, as opposed to being a sudden about face, thou shalt go this way.
Yeah, Chelsea can feel that she's going to be sent in that direction rather than suddenly being shoved in that direction, which is what would happen if he didn't add in that round of the hand.
And then as for this styling choice, I love it because like Chelsea just had her lovely moment with that extended counterbalanced underarm turn. And then Austin is taking his turn to have a bit of a moment. And it can be like a really simple formula to think of, but like you go, I go, we go. So you do something on your own, I do something on your own, on my own, and then we do something shared musically.
Yeah.
Yes.
Almost like how a dance should work. Very true. Very true. I love these stylized walks. They're so fun. And I love that Chelsea sees that that's what Austin's doing and kind of does it in her own way, even though she's going backwards. It's a very similar, like knee to knee movement.
Yep. Because we're so used to seeing Shorty George or boogie walks where the partners have already broken apart. They're far away from each other, and then they both do a high kick, and then they go towards each other. But I appreciate this version, and the way like that clap right there is not only musical, but it's a heads up. It's like, hey, I got to do a thing. It's very useful. So Chelsea realizes something new is about to happen.
Yeah. A lot of times you do see that like kind of hand movement or like snaps or something when somebody's about to go into these like boogie walk, Shorty George, whatever, whatever you want to call them. And I think that that's a good signal for your partner to do that initially.
I want to highlight how Austin is rolling through his feet. So he's not only landing, striking on the ball of his foot, but the outside ball of his foot. And he's rolling not just forward as he's moving forward, but inward across the foot. So you can really see right here how we can see the ball of his foot before he rolls onto it. And the same thing right here. He's got a bevel to his right ankle, so that way he can then roll inward. And it's that side-to-side motion that creates Shorty George. And I think the distinction is with a boogie walk. If you were to watch head on, the knee kind of does a kind of a elliptical motion instead of just side to side. If it's just straight old side to side, it's a Shorty George. If the knee is kind of doing a whoop, like a full on elliptical motion, I think that's a boogie walk.
I believe so.
Yeah.
If you really want to know the difference, there is a rather old video of Robert Royston on YouTube.
I linked it in one of our previous videos. It was so excellent. I believe he's in a cowboy hat. It's fantastic.
Yes.
Austin just makes that look so easy. Sir.
I love that he, because he can't quite finish cleanly on the planted foot, right? So he starts out here, he rotates around, and because he doesn't quite have enough momentum to continue around that second turn, he actually takes it and changes the weight and then brings up the other knee and kind of styles it to finish it out. So it's still a smooth 2 rotations, but it's not a committed on 1 foot 2 rotations.
Yeah.
I think that's one of my pet peeves is that when people don't quite have enough momentum to get around full rotations for any kind of turn that they're doing, they just stay there rather than kind of coming out of it in a cleaner manner and like putting the other foot down, or like Austin did, changing to the other foot,
Well, I really appreciate how Chelsea goes from this rotated position to letting her right foot come forward. So she's closer to him, just waiting for him to reconnect instead of having finished the direction in which she was going and then ending up too far away from him. Oh, that pause.
It's such a good moment between the two of them. They kind of take a second, reconnect, and then Chelsea looks back towards all of the leads in the background there.
Yeah, because it's essentially hitch timing, just minus the hitch movement. It's a pause and go instead of a hitch and go.
Yeah. I also like that Chelsea is aware that he is wanting to lead her forward, so she changes her posture into a manner in which her hip can really connect, because she still has her head elsewhere.
Yeah, her head.
And so she,
half of her body.
So she changes into kind of more of a bent position with her legs, and that allows her hips to connect to Austin so he can just lead her. And she doesn't have to be concerned about what he's trying to do.
Mm-hmm. This is such a simple styling as a leader, but it is so lovely where you're just essentially taking advantage of what you are already doing. You are already counterbalancing the follow into their coaster step, the 3 and 4 of a whip. But instead of doing his triple, he's just extending his left leg out away from him in a very small ronde, moving forward. And the other thing about that is it's a great way to load up some tension across his body, to flick it forward right here. So see how he traveled so far forward, and that's allowing him to trade places with Chelsea and to help accelerate the turn he's leading ever so slightly. No shirts were sacrificed in the making of this dance.
I find it very ironic because I'm pretty sure right about this time it says something about in my skin, in your skin, something like that.
That was beautiful. I never realized that.
It's almost like they meant it to happen.
So great. But that's like, it's a good representation of how connected she is into his upper arm there.
Yeah.
Because that's a really important part of counterbalancing this shared rotation.
Yeah. A lot of times what you see with less experienced dancers is when they go into these types of movements, they will do it in a manner in which either they give their partner their full weight or they don't give their partner enough weight for the counterbalance to work well.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a fine line. Not really, but kind of.
Yeah.
There needs to be connection there, but you don't want too much.
Right. But I would say in general, follows tend not to give enough either connection and or weight. And when I say weight, I don't mean like limp weight. I mean engaged weight through connection.
Right.
But in my opinion, it is much easier to lead a heavy follow than it is a light follow. And the faster the song, the more important that is.
Yeah, definitely.
So note how this is a right to right push tuck. However, he is stopping her right hand in front of the right side of her body. It has not crossed in front of her face to the right side of his body. It's still just a plain old normal push tuck to her.
Yes.
I'm gonna just, move on from that because I've got strong feelings. We'd be here a while.
Yeah, don't let follows arms cross in front of their faces. Then it becomes a totally different connection.
Yeah, and you have to resolve it differently. But most leaders don't realize that and then try to resolve it the normal way. And then it's not fun.
Doesn't work out.
Wow. I love how Austin is seeking her hip right there with his left hand instead of just depending on any sort of like just tension in the handhold. He is close to her hip, therefore he's going to use it instead of just depending on the hands.
Yeah.
It's so pretty. This is something that I have taught many leaders before, but I know one student on this call tonight might enjoy this example in particular. You know who you are. But I want you to notice how Austin's body keeps traveling past his foot. Like his head is out over nothing right now. And he is trusting himself to catch himself with his foot underneath. So it's his center moving that's creating the lead, not necessarily the foot placement.
Yeah. And, really the reason that he's able to do that is because Chelsea is also giving him, that away So they're creating that tension. She's balancing him.
Yep.
The start of this dance is a really good example of when I was saying earlier that Chelsea kind of chooses when to connect her hips with her partner and with her arm. So right here, she's really not connected to Austin at all. Like he has his hand on her, but she's giving him no weight. She, is pretty much like split weight. And then when she moves her feet in together, she still has her whole weight. Like she's not really giving him too much. And so he has to kind of start creating some movement in order for him to catch on and really start that connection with her again. And the reason that she's doing that is because she does want to style this right here, which is fine. I just wanted to point it out.
Yeah, and he's really very much allowing that to happen as well, because he wants to play.
Yeah,
and they need to start small again. It's a new song. They can't start where they finished off the last dance. It's a fresh start. You need to start small again.
Exactly.
That's actually been a problem. I see that in some champion spotlights where they get 2 songs and then they kind of start the second song where they left off the first one. And then they have nowhere to go. It kind of, it devolves instead of evolving, and it's rough.
Yeah. Which, I mean, I think partially that just has to do with like you get into that energy when you're in the spotlight and, and especially if there's like a really good crowd, like if there's people that are really kind of interacting with you, I'm giving you that energy back. I think that's kind of, it creates that really higher energy that kind of makes it hard to drop back down sometimes.
Oh, yeah. Oh, here is that over rotation again, but just from the other side of Chelsea. So you can see it from the other angle.
Yeah, and Austin's doing the same thing that he did in the very first one we looked at, where he is pressing her open, but she's taking it a little further with her hips.
Yeah. This positioning that Austin is getting into to create that prep for her, because yes, she's taking her hips further than his hand is, but his hand is prepping her enough to release her for that rotation. If she chose not to continue rotating her hips, she would still be able to follow this at the speed on time. And I just want you to notice how his elbow is very much in his own rib cage. His arm is like rotated open like a door from his torso. So his hand is out to his side. And then the thing you can't see because her arm is in the way is that her arm is like basically pushing into the back of his wrist. So the front of his wrist is stretched. The back of his hand is closer to his forearm than the palm. And that tension in his arm is what then gets released. A lot of leaders who are first learning to do this motion put the emphasis in almost like the chicken wing release. But notice how he barely, it's maybe like 45 degrees that he changes to be able to release her from that. But that's only because the prep was so close into his body with proper wrist positioning. A lot of leaders, when learning this particular pattern, will in this moment on this count 2, be in more or less a normal kind of relaxed closed position frame with their right arm, and then they'll just try to fling them off their arm, and it doesn't work. And when your fellow's taller than you, that really doesn't work because you can't chicken wing high enough.
I will say that it is partially on the follows to really help give that connection in with that inner part of the arm. Because, if you don't have that connection, then the leads are going to have to do a lot more to initiate your movement, which is when a chicken wing could happen, like a really drastic one, which, is not particularly aesthetically pleasing. So really to prevent that follows, you also need to make sure that you are locking in with that arm as well.
Yeah. But that being said, if the leader's arm is straight and or the elbow is pointing out to the side instead of straight down, there's kind of only so much you can do. You can make it happen if you want to, but more often than not, I don't want to work that hard. So it's just a send out without a turn. It's fine.
So basically what we're saying is this is a partner dance.
Yeah.
So you both have to.
There's our intro for this week.
I kind of felt it as I said it.
Oh yeah. We're just gonna enjoy this in slow motion. That's what we're gonna do.
It's so good.
I'm so sad. Austin
threatened to join us really well done.
It's fabulous. It's fabulous. I love it so much. Unironically, I love it.
Yes. It's such a good moment. So I think what's such a great thing about it is that it really brings something in that is unique to this song style. Right, because it's a little bit more Latin-y, and you know, we want a little bit more sassy, and you know, for Chelsea, the shoulders, and Austin's getting some of the hips in. So, you know, I think that it's really important to consider the song that you're dancing to, and so adding in little things like this really does make a big difference, right? Especially because they're not even connected, but this is really a moment that they're having.
Yeah. Just further proof that you don't have to do a weight supported move to have a moment.
Yeah.
Another thing I would scream from the rooftops, from the mountaintops, if I knew people would hear me, but I don't think they will. Ooh. I want to highlight this simple styling that Austin's doing. Because it's not just his leg, it's also affecting his hips. So you can see right here, his hips are rotating to the left. He's not just rotating the femur inside the hip socket. And like there are moments where you maybe want that kind of Bob Fosse isolation. So I'm not saying blanket wrong, but understanding that like the root technique should probably affect the areas of the body that things are next to. Isolation is a particular skill. It shouldn't be your foundation of movement. That styling of his leg and his foot is also affecting his hips. So he's getting his hips swiveling as well. And what's nice is because they're connected, Chelsea's able to feel that. And like it's one of those things where they could have both had the same idea at the same time. But I would argue that it's also in part because of the connection, it's allowing for that contra body to go through the connection. So Chelsea could feel that that's what Austin was doing within his body because she could feel it in the connection. So
as she's coming around here, you can really see how far forward she's angled, and that's partially because of her dancing really on her toes. She's not placing the heels down at all, and as long as you use that properly, that's fine. But like in this particular position, she would more likely than not want to be in a compression connection rather than a stretch connection. Just because of how she's angled with that upper body. She's going to have that forward momentum rather than it would be really, really hard to have that stretch connection when your upper body is forward.
Yeah, that would depend literally on you just having momentum away.
Right.
It's less about your positioning and more about just the inertia of your body moving away. And then this styling right here that Chelsea does, it's one of those, it's like an illusion thing. And if you don't know how it works, you might be like, wow, my hip can't do that. But all she's doing is kind of leaving her knee where it is and bending her left leg while she's rotating on her standing foot. And that creates the illusion that she's rotating her left hip, like the femur and the hip joint open more than she is. So don't hurt yourself. Realize it's a trick of the eye. I adore you, Austin. So
I was gonna say, do you want to talk about hand positioning?
I know, because like so often on this show, we talk about how it's the leader's job to be the changing variable more often than not. So that way the follows frame can be a constant. And that way the follow isn't having to manage way too much varying information all the time. They can just follow. And this is an excellent example of that, where Austin is going into a rather extreme position to make it comfortable for Chelsea. So he's not only rotating at the shoulder, both swinging behind, but also rotating inwards. So you can see how his elbow is now pointing out away from him. And also his hand hold, he's really stretching the inside of his wrist open and compressing the back half. And see how she's able to have a pretty darn normal compression frame. Whereas Austin looks kind of, if she were to suddenly disappear from this picture, you'd be like, you okay, sir?
Do you want to talk about that like rotation, that slight rotation that he's creating in Chelsea when he's moving?
Yeah. So the first thing I want to note is going into this on his count 2, he's rotated slightly to his right with his whole body. And then when he catches her hand, he starts rotating to his left, straightening his left leg while he is putting his right arm in that rather compromising position. And the reason why he's putting it so far past his body is so he can use the compression in his left hand, her right hand, to stop her right side from progressing towards him. So she is now shaped to, or turned to her right, because of how he set her up here. And then he just equal and opposite out the other end. But he was very purposeful about adjusting his frame to get her to shape to her right without her frame having to change drastically. He was the one doing all of that changing. Mwah, thank you, sir. Actually, that's kind of what he tried to lead me in socially once, but I am like twice Chelsea's size. So the first time I didn't realize it was a variation on a click clack until like the last 2 counts. I was like, oh, that's what you wanted. But instead of me having to do anything, he was like, wait. And then he let it again. And he changed the degree to which he was moving because I simply have a larger frame, and bam, we did it perfectly. And I didn't have any trouble following it whatsoever because he made the correct adjustments based on my frame.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
And, you know, that's not to say that he didn't initially do it wrong.
Right. It would have worked on a smaller,
he initially didn't
follow.
do it in an adjusted manner. Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Aaron said this man's a genius.
Yes, I agree.
Yes.
He's also an absolutely excellent teacher for those of you who have never taken a lesson from him. Just want to put that out there.
Would recommend. We also had him on our show a while back. If you haven't seen that,
he was one of our first guest hosts, and then he turned into YouTube DJ Austin in the late night hours. It was fantastic.
I want to talk about this last like weight supported movement when they're forward. You know what I'm talking about? This is a really fun like weight assisted movement. And if I recall correctly, everyone like went wild for it when they got out of it.
Everyone lost it. It had the same effect as like the extended underarm turn, but like turned up 10 degrees.
So this is a really similar movement, but kind of in the opposite way. So the first one was, it was really starting up in the hands and gradually, you know, moving away from each other. But this one is starting more kind of in the hips, and they're moving a little bit more towards each other.
Yeah, the extended underarm was a tension-based styling, whereas this is a compression-based. And she is set up in such a way to not only see him with her eyes, say like, do you get what I'm trying to do? But she also has her left foot behind her to catch her, so she could still do something
Yeah.
Even if he didn't necessarily offer the weights. So that's just smart. What's the word I'm looking for? It's just smart following. Like she's leaving options available to herself.
Yeah.
And then there's
and I think
I get excited.
I think part of the important part of this is the way that Austin has his hand connected to her. He has it in such a manner that it's not really complicated for him to resist and really counter her. If he had it in a different shape, it's going to make it a lot harder for him to give the correct weight that he needs to give her. But because it's kind of like the same as earlier, where he had kind of more like an open palm of sorts, and she's pushing into it gradually.
And then I love how he's drawing her in at first with simply upper body rotation and bringing his elbow past his center. And he doesn't pick up this foot and move it at all until later. I think a lot of leaders would automatically pick up the foot first instead of using upper body rotation to create that space. But what's really nice about that rotation is it creates so much more tension across his body. Like if we think of a basic third foot, the reason why it's so stable to be in tension in third foot is because of that open outside leg. If we were to be facing our partners in parallel in tension, we would have to sit into a squat in order to counterbalance each other. So the rotation helps counterbalance so much. And then it also has the amazing handy effect of he's basically placing their handhold on his hip and attaching that compression connection to his hips, his center, instead of it 100% being like on his arm.
Arm. Yeah.
Then musically, I just love how they take their time getting into this moment. And once she understands that she can trust him with her weight, she faces back to the audience. And the way she performs this with her face is just as powerful as the way she's dancing it with her body.
Agree.
And the twist ending is when she does some fun, fast footwork from that position. And it's so delightful and surprising. And that variation in timing, making it complex, just adds so much to the moment.
Yeah. I was going to say, I appreciate how she was very clearly like gauging how much weight she was giving him and didn't give him too much and didn't give it to him for too long. Those are both two really important variables.
Yep.
Sorry, your turn.
Okay. And then I love at the end how Austin goes for a trading places underarm turn, because he totally has the ability, if he so chose, to really step backwards and like push the slot this way. But she just did a lot, and it's nice to give her a break. And they also just had this compression that exploded away into sudden, stronger tension. And so letting that kind of resolve a little bit more equally on either side and trading places for the underarm turn is just such a lovely, natural choice to make out the other side of that weight supported move.
Yeah. There's some dances that you just really could talk about for way longer.
Right. And this was one of them. Well, this was our last episode of 2021.
Yep.
We have done a year and a half now. Like, what is think what episode is this? This is episode
like 70 something, I think.
Yeah, 74, 75, 76, one of those. I just want to thank everybody for being with us this long and for supporting us, and because we aren't going to stop. We'll be back sometime in January.
Not sure when.
And hopefully we'll have our next guest host with us soon. Thank you all so much.
We have somebody set up.
Yeah, but we just need to prod them again to schedule a date. Well, thank you all so much for joining us, and happy holidays. Oh, my computer wants power. Please hold while I plug her in. This gaming laptop is a hungry beast, but I'm not mad about it because she's powerful. Now, if only I could find, you know, the port is behind instead of on the side. So I am just, you know,
that's weird.
I could be doing this an easier way. Just going in blind. I figure for the comedy, you know. Oh, was I just going into the wrong one? Yes, I was. Okay. Hi. Hello. Okay. Where'd my pen go? All right, we're back. And then I appreciate. We appreciate. You go first.